Stickeen. This story is true. The great explorer and environmentalist John Muir first met the little dog Stickeen while exploring in Alaska. This is the story of their most memorable adventure. In the summer of 1880, I set out from Fort Wrangell in the canoe. I planned to explore mountains of ice called glaciers in southeastern Alaska. My companions on board included 4 men and a little black dog. The dog was named Stickeen, after the Stickeen Indians. He was a short-legged, shaggy pup with a bushy tail like a squirrel's. His dark eyes were sharp and clear. I did not want to take Stickeen. Before we left, I told his master, "Such a little pup will only be in the way. Best to leave him behind." But his master said, "He will be no trouble at all. He is the perfect wonder of a dog. He can handle cold like a polar bear and swim like a seal." As his master spoke, Stickeen looked up at me as if to say, "I am going with you. I will not be left behind." Our large and sturdy canoe floated down rivers and over waves, past islands and tall cliffs from the start. Stickeen was a curious character, puzzling and independent. As we rode, Stickeen spent the days in lazy ease, often seeming to be in a deep sleep. Somehow, though, he always knew what was going on. If a duck or seal attracted our attention, for example, he would rest his chin on the edge of the canoe and calmly look out like a dreamy-eyed tourist. When we talked about making a landing, Stickeen would immediately jump up to see what sort of place we were approaching. Before we even reached the beach, he leaped overboard and swam ashore. Stickeen was always the first one out of the canoe. Stickeen was always the last one to get in. He could never be found when we were ready to continue our journey. He refused to come when we called, yet he was watching us from some secret hiding place, for as soon as our canoe set out, he would come trotting down the beach, plunging into the water and swim after us. He knew we would stop rowing and take him in. I did not understand Stickeen. He was as cold as a glacier. He rarely wagged his tail. He never asked for a hug or a pat on the head. When it was time to play or cuddle by the campfire, he would go off by himself, aloof and distant. "I don't have time to play or sit by the fire," he seemed to say. Yet if there were rivers to swim, mountains to climb, or icy snow to cross, he could act as strong and fierce as a mountain man. Once our party crossed ice so rough and sharp, Stickeen's feet began to bleed. His every step was marked by blood, yet he trotted on without a whimper or a cry. In spite of myself, I took pity on him. Though I knew he would not thank me, I made him 4 tiny moccasins out of my handkerchief. For some reason, Stickeen liked to follow me on my explorations. Whenever I left the camp alone, he was by my side. Yet he came as if to watch me with mysterious eyes, rather than to share my journey as my friend. Early one morning, a storm began to blow. Everyone else in the camp was sleeping, but I hurried to explore the music and motions of the storm. Taking my ice axe, buttoning my coat, and putting a notebook and a piece of bread in my pocket, I set out. I had not gone far when I saw Stickeen running through the snowy storm to join me. "No, Stickeen!" I shouted at him over the howling wind. "What has gotten into your queer noodle now? This wild day has nothing for you. Go back to camp and keep warm." Again and again I ordered him back, but he would not leave. He simply stood in the wind, drenched and blinking, as if to say, "Where you go, I will go." I could not shake him, no more than the earth can shake the moon, so I pushed on. Stickeen trotted on my heels. All day we climbed the snowy mountains and watched the storm. What a song this storm sang! How fresh the smell of new snow and the cold, crisp air! When I had the chance, I drew pictures of the white mountains in my notebook. Stickeen stayed a little behind, watching me with secret, distant eyes. As we continued our journey, we headed towards a large mountain of ice called Taylor Glacier. The glacier rose before us, huge and forbidding, like a great evil creature guarding a place no man had ever gone. Many miles we climbed to reach the top of the glacier. There we found a field of ice as thick as a mountain, stretching as far as the eyes could see. Eagerly we began exploring. For a mile or two we found the ice quite safe. Soon, however, we met many long, deep cracks in the ice called crevasses, chasms so deep that no light had ever reached their depths. Death seemed to lie within these holes. Often we were forced to jump these crevices in order to continue on our way. One crevice was so wide that after leaping, I tottered for several seconds before falling forward to safety. As I rested after the jump, I could not help but reflect on how near I had come to death. I have often felt that to meet one's fate on a noble mountain or in the heart of a crystal glacier would be a blessed end to an adventurous life. I was sure too that I had never had happiness enough for a dozen lives. Nevertheless, even the best death, quick and clean, laying so openly before me, was not easy to face. In contrast, Stickeen appeared untroubled. Though the crevice lay like bottomless holes before us, Stickeen showed neither caution nor curiosity, wonder nor fear. He sailed over each crevice like a flying cloud, and then trotted on as carelessly as if the glaciers were his playground. Just as the day began to fade towards night and it was time to return to camp, we were stopped by a very large crevice. Below my feet, two steep cliffs of ice stretched away from each other. I shook my head. This crevice must be more than 50 feet wide. My boy, far too wide to jump. Stickeen grew quiet. He pawed the icy ground with his foot and looked up at me with wide, wondering eyes. Looking for a way to escape, I walked along the deep and wide ice canyon for almost a mile. Could we go back the way we had come? I wondered. No, we had come too far and had crossed many deep crevices. I recalled the crevice I had managed to leap, but with no room to spare. I dare not risk jumping it again. Also, night was approaching and the sky was dark with the snow of a new storm. Beyond all of this, we were wet to the skin and hungry. We were trapped. Were we trapped? Marooned on the island of ice. Then I saw a thin bridge of ice stretched across the crevice. Fresh snow blew in my face as I looked closer. I saw that this ice bridge would not be easy to cross. It dipped in the middle like a jump rope held between two icy giants, and its top was almost as thin as a blade as a knife. Also, simply reaching the bridge would be hard. I would have to climb about 10 feet almost straight down to reach the nearest end of the bridge. A similar, almost straight upward climb waited at the far end of the bridge. Yet this frightening, dangerous route was only our hope to escape. Stickeen pressed close to my leg for the first time. He seemed afraid. He looked at me and began to mutter and whine, saying as plaintively as if speaking, "Surely you are not going to try to cross that awful crevice." "Hush your fears, my boy," I said. "We will get across safely, though it is not going to be easy. Often we must risk our life to save them." But Stickeen ignored my words. He only whined louder and covered his face with his paws. I took out my ice axe to chip steps into the side of the glacier, down to the ice bridge. Holding onto the notch of ice with one hand and using the steps I made, I cut more steps in the ice wall until finally I reached the ice bridge. On the bridge, I sat astride as if riding a horse. Slowly I inched my way across the bridge, cutting off its sharp top with careful strokes and creating a narrow surface about 4 inches wide for Stickeen to walk upon. I dared not look down into the deep blue and white pit plunging beneath me. I kept my eyes only on the ice bridge. Reaching the end of the bridge, I was not yet safe. Almost 10 feet of ice rose above me. Weary as I was, I forced myself to focus. I began to chip handholds and footholds into the wall of ice, chipping, climbing, holding on with my feet and fingers in mere notches. Never before had I worked so long under deadly strain. How I got up that cliff, I don't know. The thing seemed to have been done by somebody else. A power I could not see or understand had replaced my own small skill and strength. As soon as I reached safety, Stickeen howled louder than ever. As he howled, he ran about, searching for another way to escape. "The bridge is not as bad as it looks, Stickeen, old boy," I shouted. "You are small enough to walk across." Stickeen moved closer to the bridge as if he would try. Then he lay on his back in despair, howling as if to say, "Ooh, what a place! No, I cannot go across that bridge." "If you don't come, Stickeen, I will leave you," I said, pretending to leave by hiding behind a ridge of ice. He did not come. I went back to the edge of the crevice and called to him in a stern voice. "I really must go now. I can wait no longer. The storm is growing worse and night is almost upon us." Stickeen looked at me across the chasm of ice. His eyes were like clear windows in his heart. Though a tiny pup, I saw he was feeling big, wise fears. I bent to one knee and softened my voice. "If you don't come, my boy, all I can promise is that I will return for you tomorrow. But I can't promise that the wolves or the coming storm won't finish you before then." Stickeen looked around at the growing darkness. He knew I was serious. At last, oh, At last, with the courage of despair, hunched and breathless, he began to move towards the ice bridge, down the ice steps I had made. Stickeen's small body wobbled uncertainly on the almost vertical slope. Steep downward climbs are not easy for dogs. Stickeen reached the bridge safely. He stood before it and shivered. Snow swirled around him, touching his dark fur and clinging to his whiskers. He looked up to me as if he stood at the beginning of the bridge. "I am afraid, but I can be brave," I heard him say, as clearly as I heard the wind rushing past my ears. Then, very slowly, he lifted a front paw and carefully took one step. Just as slowly, he lifted a second paw, another step. Lifting his feet carefully as if counting each step, 1, 2, 3, 4. Stickeen walked, ever so cautiously. Longing to help, I kept my eyes upon him, as if they had the power to keep him from falling. He reached the end of the bridge, but he still had to climb the second, almost straight slope. Had I had a rope, I would have made a lasso to lift him safely. Yet I had no rope. Stickeen would have to be made the climb by himself. Could he do it, or would I have to leave him, even though he had come this far? Stickeen took a long look at the notches I had chiseled on the ice, as if he had memorized each one. Dogs are not good climbers, yet he seemed to know he must not fall now. Carefully, he hooked his paws up to each notch I had made. Then, before I could see how he did it, he whizzed to the top to safety. Well done, little boy, brave boy," I cried, trying to catch and caress him. But he would not be caught. He darted hither and thither in his great joy, screaming and shouting, swirling round and round in giddy loops and circles, like a leaf in the whirlwind, lying down and rolling over, then jumping up to yelp and cry again. I ran to him to shake him, fearing he might die of joy. He ran off 200 or 300 yards, his feet in mist of motion. Then, turning suddenly, he rushed at my face, almost knocking me down, all the time screeching and shouting as if to say, "Saved, saved, saved." Stickeen seemed ready to celebrate for the rest of the night, yet we had a far ways to go, and it would soon be dark. I finally persuaded him to continue on our journey. On we went, filled with the joy of triumph. Stickeen fearfully flew across the snow. Not until dark did he settle into his normal trot. We reached camp about 10 that evening. We found a big fire and a supper that included wild strawberries, but we lay down too tired to eat much. Therefore, Stickeen was my true friend. During the rest of the trip, he never went off alone. He stayed at my side and always tried to keep me in sight. At night around the campfire, he would come to me. No longer were his eyes mysterious, distant, aloof. He would rest his head on my knee and touch my hand with his tongue. Often he caught my eye and seemed to say, "Weren't we brave, you and I? Weren't we brave out on that glacier?" The end.